Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Kansas Soybean Commission. The soybean checkoff. It works for everyone.
I keep reading about engineered corn, but I don't know what that means.
Spring water, purified water, what's the difference?
Is imported beef safe for my family?
Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy. That's where Real Ag comes in. From plant to plant and from pasture to plate, Kyle Bauer and the Real Ag crew find the facts to help you sort the truth and help you understand Real Ag. Now here's your host, Kyle Bauer.
Wind power. To some it's the future, to others it's an eye blight. One thing's for sure, it's more complex than it seems. Wind power is our topic today on Real Ag. Why wind energy on Real Ag? The history of wind energy and farming are intertwined. People have been using wind energy for centuries. Milling grain, pumping water, even electricity from wind is older than you might think. Modern wind energy needs wide open spaces, and that makes it a rural issue.
Wind farms require large acreage that the wind farms could then be spaced out such that they don't interfere with homes or businesses, and they have to have the right topography so that we can capture the energy of the wind.
How does wind energy work? As the wind strikes a windmill's blades, they turn, and that rotational energy is transferred down to power another mechanism to achieve the desired results.
Wind turbines utilize the propeller. The propeller blades are attached to this propeller hub. The energy is transmitted to a transmission. The transmission then steps up the RPMs to the generator, and the generator then is hooked to the electricity grid, and the electricity is then sent down the line. Two different ways we look at wind energy is transmission grid or distribution grid. Basically, both utilize the exact same method of converting the wind to the electricity. The electricity then is sent down to the ground to the distribution grid. Then it's either transformed up or is utilized as electricity at the location that the turbine is actually set up at. If it's transformed up, it'll go down the transmission lines. The transmission lines will feed it out to other areas, other towns, and such.
Transmission is the sole facilitator for wind. Without transmission, the state of Kansas will be limited with the capacity of the wind that can be built. Yes, obviously the wind, as you see the turbines in the background here, when the wind blows above a certain miles per hour, the turbines turn, and each one of those is an individual generator, so it generates electricity, and then it's collected into a substation like this, and then our transmission system, the robust transmission grid, transmits that energy to the producers throughout the state and throughout the region. So the transmission system is really a facilitator to transmit the wind energy to the customers in this region.
The wind energy is produced, of course, at the wind farm, at the wind turbine, and it's transmitted across our high voltage transmission system into the communities that have many customers that then would use the electricity in their homes and businesses. Wind energy is very efficient because it harnesses the power of the wind, which essentially is a fuel-free resource for us. So the power of nature is actually helping us produce electricity. I will say that wind energy can only be a portion of our power because, like most consumers, I would like to make sure that I have electricity during times when the wind is not blowing. Therefore, it does require other conventional forms of power production to be in play so that customers can be assured of electricity 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Yeah, the turbine actually is an extremely visible aspect of it. This would be what we classify the nacelle. It has a nice pretty white cover that goes over the top of it, and that's what we see at the very top of the tower. This particular windmill sets about 80 feet off the ground. Your large wind turbines at wind farms are going to be over 200 feet off the ground. There is an advantage to height of that pole. A lot of people don't understand that at 30 feet, every 30 feet off the ground, you get a 2% increase in wind speed. So that's the reason the turbines are getting taller and taller and taller. With this particular size of windmill, we're on an 80-foot tower. The tower that we see is a tubular steel tower. The nacelle that we have here and the propeller blades that attach here, the propeller blades they are fiberglass. is their design. Right now that they're starting to move to more carbon fiber things and for the future, but right now the large wind turbines that you see, as well as these smaller windmills, are all made out of fiberglass. The tower is a big steel tower that is anchored into the ground with a large amount of concrete to keep it upright.
Wind energy is a viable resource today, and it continues to improve. The technology continues to get better and better in small increments. It certainly makes sense for wind to play a role in serving a portion of our customers' needs. It can only serve a portion of those needs, though. We need all the traditional resources as well to meet our customers' future needs. The primary reason that I say that is that wind energy is not a dispatchable resource. And what dispatchable means is that wind energy, we can't call upon it to generate electricity when our customers demand electricity. And the thing that people don't often understand about the electric business and the electricity that comes to your home is it's a real-time business. So when you flip a light switch on, some power plant somewhere needs to ramp up its production to meet the demand that you created when that light switch goes off.
Storage of electricity is very difficult. If it's AC, which is your house current electricity, the electricity that is powering the light right at this exact moment was just generated. DC is what your car has, and it is storable in a battery. The problem we have is we don't have a battery for AC applications. You can't do that yet. So as the environment of renewable energy changes and we progress forward, I'm assuming that AC storage battery will actually come up. But as of yet, we don't have a way to store the AC electricity. So we have to store it in DC applications, and DC is going to be your smaller 2.5 to 5 to 10 kilowatt machines.
Why have wind farms if it's not controllable from a dispatch perspective? Well, one of all, it's environmentally friendly. It is more friendly to the environment to produce energy through a wind farm. Also, from a cost standpoint, while wind energy is more expensive today than our current generating assets other than natural gas, if we have to build new resources in the future to meet our customers' needs, the cost of resources to build new can be very expensive. Nuclear power could be $100 a megawatt hour. A new coal plant maybe $75 a megawatt hour. Natural gas plants somewhere over their life $60 a megawatt hour. Wind resources are available today in the $30 to $40 a megawatt hour range. So for incremental generation that we would build in the future, wind is very cost competitive. But again, we have to remember that we can't dispatch it, so prices and everything, because I know when it's 100 degrees, I want my air conditioner running, and wind may not be able to provide that on its own.
With a very robust transmission grid, and we talked earlier about our vision for the state of Kansas of having a robust transmission grid, you can move power several hundred miles. The higher the voltage, the farther you can transmit it. This particular facility is 345,000 volts, and we can move this energy, to Chicago, Dallas, New Orleans. Now, obviously, it's all part of an interconnected grid, but the power can be moved quite some distance on 345 kV lines. So what you're viewing here is a typical high voltage transmission substation. Within it you have the protective devices to protect the equipment, to protect the transmission lines, and you also have transformers which step up or step down the transmission voltage. Obviously we generate wind at 34.5 kV, and in order to get it stepped up to the 345,000 volts or 345 kV, you have to have a transformer. So you'll see those facilities, those devices in this particular substation. But that's just a typical substation with line terminals for 4 or 5 lines that are coming in and a couple transformers, and then all the protective equipment.
A wind energy project doesn't sprout up overnight. A lot of planning and negotiations and scientific studies have to happen before a wind project can move forward.
Well, in a nutshell, wind energy requires 4 main components. First, it requires landowners willing to have the wind farms on their property. It requires land that has low environmental impacts. It requires a site with good wind dynamics, with a good sustained wind that would produce a lot of energy. And finally, it requires access to high voltage transmission lines where once the power is produced, it can be transported to customers who will then use the electricity. Also, there are the wind energy developers who make the project possible, the customers who consume the power that's going to be produced by the wind farms, and then the utilities who have the obligation of providing the lowest cost energy to their customers. There are also many regulatory agencies involved, from the local to the state, as well as the Kansas Corporation Commission, who regulates the utilities, including Westar Energy in Kansas. You know, the main concern about a wind farm is to get it sited right and get it in the right place where people want the wind farms.
You know, we had landowner negotiations, we had, utility filings that had to be approved, we had to get cost allocation approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission out of Washington, D.C. So there were several hurdles to get there, but all of them have been overcome, and we are happy to look at, transmission in the air behind me.
All levels of government, both state and local and federal government, are involved. Various regulatory bodies like the Kansas Corporation Commission, and then we also consult heavily with a number of environmental groups, and we have to bring all those people together to make a successful project. It takes thousands and thousands of acres to build a wind farm. A 100 megawatt wind farm, which is a typical utility size, takes at least 5,000 acres of land, so landowners are very important. The developers go out and talk to these landowners, find their interest in building those projects, and then find contiguous segments of land that they can use to build these projects. And then they prove the wind data there. So the wind developers take the land from the landowners, reach agreement with them, and prove that it's a viable site. And then the different governmental bodies have different approvals and requirements that we need to comply with. And then our regulators play a critical role in understanding all that's gone into this proposed project to say that it's suitable for our customers to pay for. One, of course, is local acceptance. We don't want to go into an area where we're not wanted. We want to find an area that has low environmental impacts, and obviously we need strong wind dynamics. Kansas is the second best state in the nation as far as wind dynamics, but even within our state we need to pick the right locations. And then lastly, we have to be able to get that power to customers from that wind farm, and so we need good access to the electric transmission system that we can connect to in a cost-effective way. Wind dynamics in the wind generation area really means you need strong, sustained winds. Periods of gusty wind and then no wind are not as valid for wind production as strong, steady wind dynamics, and we really have those in the state of Kansas, particularly in the western half of the state.
Wind energy is cleaner than most other sources, but there's still environmental concerns surrounding it. Noise, impact on wildlife, and even aesthetics have to be considered when a wind energy project is built.
Environmental impacts from wind farms are really related to the plant and foliage in the areas of the wind farm, and then the animals that live in that area. Particularly we try to stay out of native grasslands, build these farms more toward tilled lands, and then also if there are any endangered species or species that are struggling, such as prairie chickens, whooping cranes, we try to either stay out of those areas or construct the wind farm in a fashion that mitigates as much of the impact as possible.
So you have the Federal Fish and Wildlife that you have to deal with. You deal with the Nature's Conservancy, you deal with the Audubon Society, you deal with all of those aspects of things to make sure that the environmental impact of a wind turbine is minimized.
Westar prefers to put our wind farms on areas that would have a very low environmental impact, and that would include areas that have natural resources such as wildlife and grasslands that we would like to preserve, along with, of course, it takes willing landowners that are willing to have the wind farms placed on their property, but we want to have as low a footprint or environmental impact as possible. Well, certainly there are some people in the state that desire wind farms. They look across the prairie and they see these big, majestic machines, and they like to see Kansas wind being harnessed for productive purposes. Others look at wind farms and they see it as an obstruction to the natural beauty of the prairie. That's why we pretty much let the people who are going to be near the wind farms make those decisions. And we at Westar make sure that our projects are accepted by the communities in which they're going to be installed before we go out and try to build a wind farm.
There are some portion of the population that thinks that wind turbines are not very pretty on the to look at. I personally enjoy them based on they're nice and slow and they never change their speed and they just sit there and just turn. No matter how hectic the environment is around them, they're just a steady process, which is kind of relaxing to me. Others are concerned about the environmental impact as far as noise levels. Honestly, a car driving by is much more noisy than a wind turbine is.
There's only one world that we can all live in, and if we can make decisions to build projects that are in many cases just as cost effective but done in a more environmentally friendly way, then we feel it's our job to do that.
What is the impact on a community when a wind project is built? Wind turbines are usually built on private property. Landowners are paid for that use. Income spreads throughout the community. Wind farms also create temporary jobs during the construction phase and permanent jobs for operations.
Obviously, wind farms are an economic boom to the communities by which they're located. You have obviously increased property taxes, you've got employment associated with wind farms. So, I think communities where wind farms have been built have seen an economic boom of a variety of factors, to tourism, to increased interest in those communities. From a transmission perspective, obviously we have jobs during the construction phase, and there will be jobs to maintain and operate the facility once it goes into service. So there are a few jobs added post-construction, but primarily the economic boom from a job perspective for the state of Kansas is during the construction phase of both the wind farm and the transmission. And then once those both go into service, there are carryover jobs for both entities.
Sure, anybody who consumes electricity in Kansas benefits by Kansas having wind farms. If you turn on your electricity or turn a switch on in your house, you're going to be benefiting from the electricity that's produced from the many wind farms in Kansas.
Wind farms can be tremendous assets for a community. By state law, wind farms are not allowed to be charged property taxes, but in many cases they have a pilot payment or payments in lieu of those taxes that go to the community, and those payments can be significant and very valuable to the community. In addition to that, landowners that are involved in the project will receive royalties over the life of the project for 20 or more years. They'll certainly reinvest some of those royalties back into the community. And then lastly, there are many jobs and hotels and restaurants from the construction workers that will build the wind farm, and then to a lesser extent to operate and maintain the farm once it's in service. So lots of benefits to communities for having a wind farm in their area.
As wind power technology improves, it's become feasible for smaller entities to capitalize on it as well.
The scales of wind power varies dramatically. You can get to, from home units that are DC that power little light bulbs to 500-watt machines that'll do a few more light bulbs. Those are all going to be DC applications charging a battery bank. There are some that actually fit on RVs, and then it moves on up to the home units, to light commercial units that are at communities, powering small cities, to industrial applications, and then you move on up from that into large wind farm applications where they're getting up to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 megawatt.
Really, there's no limit on the size of a customer who can install a wind turbine and connect it to the utility. That could be an individual customer, a homeowner, a little bit larger farm, small business. There is no limit in the law. Anyone who generates any amount of electricity will see some benefit, a reduction in their bill. But the phrase benefit can have many dimensions. if someone generates a portion of their own electricity, they have a sense of independence and pride. But the question of whether or not it's economically beneficial is much more difficult to answer. Okay, well, there's so many variables that go into determining economic benefit. For example, what is the first cost of the turbine? What are the annual maintenance costs? Does the customer qualify for tax incentives or government grants? How long will the wind turbine last? That is one of the biggest questions. In most cases, if the turbine doesn't give the customer a 20 or 25-year life, there's probably little chance that it will make a good return on investment. It just takes some time. The customer needs to talk to several dealers, price different machines, find out what their performance is, and then go through a step-by-step analysis. When the customer knows how much they will pay to get electricity from the wind turbine, they can compare that with their utility costs and assume some utility escalation rate, and then make a better judgment on whether or not it will be beneficial over the long term. If the turbine generates any amount of electricity, it will reduce the bill. The bigger question is, how much does the customer have to invest to achieve those savings, and does that investment make sense? We advise customers that the first place they should invest money is in simple conservation and energy efficiency. It's possible to save a kilowatt hour of electricity through efficiency means by maybe 3 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. On the other hand, a wind turbine might cost 10 to 20 cents per kilowatt hour or more to generate that kilowatt hour. So the best place, if you're looking purely for an economic return, the best place to invest the money is in energy efficiency first. Once all the feasible measures have been implemented, then do your homework on whether or not a wind turbine will pay for itself.
Small or large wind energy projects must be approved by several agencies before any construction can begin.
We started this process in 2007, so the first process was getting this particular project approved by the regional entity. In this particular case, in this part of the country, that entity is the Southwest Power Pool, headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas. They are the transmission provider for the 8 states in this part of the nation. So the first thing was to get this project into their plan, to get their board of directors to approve it as a necessary project to build the robust grid that they envisioned. And then once you had the Southwest Power Pool approving the project, then you started the individual state process, which we had to be certificated by the state to build the project. And then finally, we went through the state through a siting application, and the state approved our route, and now we're into the construction process. So,
the Kansas Corporation Commission, who regulates Westar Energy and all the utilities in Kansas, they are responsible for regulating the wind energy business as well. I would add that the Kansas Corporation Commission is responsible for approving any of the wind energy projects that we would propose in Kansas.
From a cost allocation perspective, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has jurisdiction for rates, terms, and conditions. They set the rate, the cost allocation for this project, and our rates. They have nothing to do with siting. Siting and all the stuff in construction is done by the states, but the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has sole jurisdiction over the rates, terms, and conditions of this facility. Yeah, KETA is the Kansas Electric Transmission Authority. It was authorized through legislation in 2004 to be a quasi-governmental agency to build transmission and promote transmission in the state of Kansas. With that, there are 7 members of the board of directors. 4 of them are from the legislature, and then 3 independent board members. And they are here to promote, to look at the state of Kansas and to find projects that will provide economic benefit to the state of Kansas and the Kansas retail customer.
I think most government entities are supportive of wind energy throughout the entire United States. Today there is an incentive, a tax incentive, created for those people who develop and produce energy using wind.
The federal government mandates that a certain percentage of energy production has to come from renewable energy. This, in addition to new transmission and turbine technology, continues to push wind energy forward.
Well, certainly the renewable sources of electricity, wind and solar, have some environmental benefits. If we just look at those two, our information is that at this point wind is more economical than solar energy. But on the other hand, if we compare wind to conventional resources, generally it is more costly. but as technology improves, especially for large wind farms, that price is coming down. I haven't seen that price decrease yet on the smaller systems, but in time that may change.
I think the future of wind energy will be interesting. My view of it is that the technology will continue to get better and more reliable. It will still have the limited availability of when the wind blows, obviously. Just how much wind energy can we economically add to the electric transmission system before it causes problems somewhere else? I think that remains to be seen. I would say at least 10% of the capacity out there could be renewables like wind. 20%, I think we're starting to bump up against operational issues and inefficiently dispatching more expensive units to allow for the wind that could raise customer bills. So in my view, the true sweet spot for wind will be somewhere between 10 and 20% of our total capacity on the system.
That wraps it up for this episode of Real Ag. We hope that the information presented here will help you better understand wind energy. On behalf of the Real Ag crew, I'm Kyle Bauer, helping you sort the truth and helping you understand Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff. It works for everyone.